I've been thinking for a while. I really have been thinking about this for a while. Can this year a Pac-12 team make the college football playoffs? Now, it's been 3 years since the Pac-12 have made the playoffs, a Pac-12 team, and that was Washington. But sadly, Washington got destroyed by Alabama. But the last win of the Pac-12 winning a college football playoff game was the Oregon Ducks when it all first began. They were the first ones to do it. But they lost in the national championship. We look at the Pac-12 now for the last, let's say, I think it's now been 3 out of the 5 seasons. The Pac-12 has literally not been taken serious, or they have, but the Pac-12 teams have just find a way to mess themselves up, meaning they just find a way to be a disappointment and not make it at all when you're supposed to be up there with high expectations. It's happened for a few years now. Like I said, 3 out of the 5. We all remember many of the games. Oregon, where Vernon Adams got his broken finger. What if he never gotten that finger broken? They probably would have beaten Michigan State, and who knows? They might have made the playoffs. Stanford, if they never lost to Oregon, they would probably be in that conversation. Then you got like last season, Oregon blew in a gigantic lead. Stanford injuries. Washington, too many dumb decision makings. Like the first game of the year, last season, Washington versus Auburn. Washington, to me, just made poor decision makings, and they just couldn't beat Auburn. And then the kicker missed a field goal against Oregon, and then they lost that game in overtime. Put in a backup quarterback over your starter. The moment you put in your backup, throws an interception, pick 6. Even though they lost by, I think it was like 6 or 3 in the end, but still Washington blew their chance. And you had Washington State, all that hype. They decided to throw the ball during the snow. And they lost that game to the Washington Huskies. And that was the last chance the Pac-12 had of making the college football playoffs. So, can this year have a Pac-12 team in there? Well, let's look at every Pac-12 team schedule. Yes. Even including that Beaver team. What's Oregon State again?
Oregon State is trash.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So let's look at it. Let's look at this. As you can see right here, these are the Pac-12 teams. All the games they are playing, their bye weeks and all that type of crap. So let's look in every schedule of every Pac-12 team going in like their biggest non-conference game. Like the biggest one you could arguably say is Oregon versus Auburn. The Ducks are right now 3-point favorites against the Auburn Tigers. I know you're shocked, right? Yeah, same here. But it's more than just a statement win for the Ducks. It's also a statement win for the conference. I mean, if you want me to tell you another statement game for the conference, you could say Stanford when they play against Northwestern or UCF, and especially Notre Dame. You could say those. Washington doesn't really have a big statement game unless you want to say BYU, but that's not much of a big statement game for the conference. For Washington State, Houston, but that's not a big statement game compared to like Oregon. The only one I could compare that's just a big statement game for the conference is probably Arizona State versus Michigan State. I could say Ole Miss, but come on, let's be for real. Ole Miss, they're like, no one cares about Ole Miss. Nobody really cares about them. For USC, it's Notre Dame as always. For Utah, it's BYU. Then for like Arizona, it's Texas Tech. For Colorado, Nebraska. UCLA, now that's another one you could gigantically make an argument for UCLA because they play San Diego State, who can be a decent team, and also Oklahoma. if they can at least beat like both of them, and then that's a big statement win for the conference itself. But UCLA, well, when was the last time you can say UCLA is a good Pac-12 team? They haven't been in the Pac-12 title in years. So, and also you have Oregon State versus Oklahoma State. That's a big, that could also mean a big statement for the conference. So you look at the Pac-12 schedule for all these teams. If you're a fan of one of these teams, awesome. But still, though, you look at the Pac-12. Most of these games are statement games, but not a lot of them. Like Washington's non-Pac-12 schedule, none of those games are like a gigantic statement. Stanford, you could argue with UCF having almost another undefeated season. You could argue with that. Oregon, because they're playing against an SEC team in Auburn. Cal, Ole Miss, because it's an SEC team. Oregon State, Oklahoma State, because it's a Big 12 team. Washington State, it's against Houston University, but that's not like a big statement because their conference has never been like a gigantic conference. No one talks about them, anybody in their conference that much often. Arizona, Texas Tech, because it's Big 12. Arizona State with Michigan State because it's Big 10. But you get my point, though. The Pac-12 has not been what they should have been. Like last season, I think a lot of Pac-12 teams, besides the bowl games, Pac-12 teams had a shot to make the college football playoffs. Washington State, to me, had the best shot because it was you had home field advantage, you were playing in the snow, and yet you were a top 10 team. The moment you ran into your hated rival in Washington, what happened? You blew it. And really, the mistake of that whole game is that they didn't run the ball. You don't run the ball. I mean, you don't pass the ball in snow conditions. Like, if you remember, like, even though the snow conditions were different, Philadelphia versus Detroit in Philadelphia. Chip Kelly's first year, snowing a lot. All they did was run the ball, and that was the one thing Washington State cannot figure out to do. They don't know when to run the football because they're mostly a passing team. But in this year, if I had to give a Pac-12 team a shot, like the top 5 or top 4, whatever, of Pac-12 teams to make the playoffs, these are the teams. Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Utah. I personally think Utah, because, it's Utah, and they actually shocked a lot of people like me. They shocked me. And you could put Washington State University because you don't know exactly what they're going to be next season. And don't be surprised if they have that situation again. Personally, I think they have that situation where they just come out of nowhere and almost win the North and maybe would have won the Pac-12 title and maybe a college football playoff appearance. But really, the biggest statement game for the conference is still Oregon versus Auburn. Because by paper, Oregon wins it, and that shows to many people that the Pac-12 can be taken serious. But if Oregon loses, and let's say Auburn becomes an average team later on the season, just like how they did last year when Washington lost to them, then you have to question, was Washington really that great after losing just an average team like that? Because Auburn had a good start, and then they just fell apart. But that's the thing, though. We look at that situation. Oregon cannot have that situation against Auburn. And like I said, it's probably the biggest one because it's the SEC. It's the best conference in the college football world. If they lose it, it's more than just a hurt for themselves. It's a hurt for the conference. I mean, who do you think people are talking about? Are they always talking about Auburn and Oregon or Cal versus Ole Miss? Because I don't understand if Ole Miss is SEC, but no one's talking about those two as much as Oregon versus Auburn because Oregon is favored to win the Pac-12. Auburn is an SEC team which we don't know what to expect. Washington, BYU, like I said, they're not like the biggest threat, but BYU can shock a lot of people. They could, like they did last year at Wisconsin. So really, we look at these games for the Pac-12, for all these Pac-12 teams. Like I also mentioned earlier, UCLA versus Oklahoma is another big statement game for the Pac-12. But like I said before, when was the last time UCLA was taken seriously? Teams like USC and Stanford, their most important games outside of the Pac-12 is clearly Notre Dame. And that's a team, if both of them beat Notre Dame, think about that. Let's say Notre Dame's two only losses from Stanford and USC. Two Pac-12 teams would have beaten a team that made the college football playoffs, that had an undefeated season until they ran into Clemson. So those would be big statement wins, especially when it's a team that made the playoffs. So, will a Pac-12 team make it this year? Do I personally think so? There's a huge possibility. Many people will decide, because right now to me, it's going to come to Oregon or Washington. Oregon because of the recruiting class they have had and bringing back Justin Herbert. And Washington because they're getting a lot of their guys back. And Washington is still has a good defense. Utah, no one understands Utah. Stanford, we have no idea. Washington State, who knows? USC may have talent, but their coach is on the line, and we'll see what happens. Colorado, yeah. Nebraska, really? I mean, Nebraska, some people say Nebraska's going to be ranked, but we'll see. Oregon State. Yeah, let me bring it up to you again. Take it away, my buddy. My Oregon Duck subscriber.
Oregon State is trash, okay?
But still, there is a shot this year for the Pac-12. It's just that when games come, or like teams like Oregon can't blow. Oregon cannot blow a big, gigantic lead. Herbert has got to play a good full game and not just show up for 1/2. Or an odd loss like they did to Arizona. Washington cannot make poor decision makings or a kicker missing a game winner field goal or not trusting in your starting quarterback. Stanford would have to be healthy. Washington State has got to be more of a running team than a passing team. They can pass, but we don't know this year. We really don't know. Utah, if they could get the right quarterback, yeah, I think they could be a big threat. USC, we don't know. Arizona State, maybe. For making the Pac-12 title, but not the playoffs. Arizona, we don't know. UCLA, who knows? But still, if a Pac-12 team does not make the play, I can't speak, sorry. If a Pac-12 team gets into the same situation as many did last season, had a shot to make the playoffs, then once again the Pac-12 will be another year of another laughingstock. But what do you guys think? Will this year we have a Pac-12 team in the college football playoffs, and you could take a pause right now to look at every schedule, and you could give me your predictions of every single Pac-12 team on what you think will go? Leave a comment down below. Hit the like button. Share this with your friends. Subscribe me more videos like this one. This is Teach TV Tank Mode. Signing off.